Bonjour, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt in morning. The Cleveland Browns fought the valiant fight in Kansas City yesterday. Came up a little bit short. Great season. Baker Mayfield and company had a great season. Kevin Stefanski is coach of the year. And they're not the first team to get out coached by Andy Reid. I hope Patrick Mahomes is back. They're a heck of a team. And next year, the Browns will reload. They'll have Grant Delpit back. They'll have Grady Williams back. They will have a healthy team in a year to install the system. And they went farther than any Browns team since 1994. So my hat is off to them. Just sad to lose. Now to the serious news of this Monday morning. More than 35,000 troops and National Guardsmen, military on duty, active duty, are deployed in the streets of Washington. Fencing is throughout the downtown area. It does not appear as though any demonstrations are planned, but there have been a few arrests of people carrying weapons where they ought not to have been arrested. The Washington Post also reports that state capitol protests are mostly small, nevertheless heavily guarded. Authorities in cities, it writes, from coast to coast, mobilized a military-style defense of state capitol complexes on Sunday, rolling out Humvees, concertina wire, thousands of National Guard troops clad in battlefield helmets to defend against the possible onslaught of rioters whipped up by baseless claims of the American president. I think that's a little overstated, but this is not. The FBI is moving on members of extremist groups, the Oath Keepers and the 3 Percenters. I've not heard of either of these groups, but they are apparently fringe fanatics. Another private paramilitary training group called the Woodland Wild Dogs is also under scrutiny, and that should go forward. I have a new column over at the Washington Post this morning, which I'll read for you later in the hour. Mitch McConnell, still the crucial Republican leader, and it's about how the party has to rally behind Mitch McConnell now. Now, of course, there are other leaders at the state level like Ron DeSantis in Florida, Governor Doug Ducey in Arizona, many other great governors. Of course, Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, Liz Cheney, Tom Emmer in the House are great leaders. But Mitch McConnell really becomes the most powerful Republican at any level. He has a united caucus. He will keep it together. It runs from moderates like Susan Collins to the most conservative member, whoever that might be. Maybe it's Ted Cruz. I'm not sure. It depends on how you're scoring and what issues you're looking at, but they usually will be persuaded to take a middle course, and Mitch will be intent upon regaining the majority in the 2022 elections, for which they are well prepared. The map is a little bit against them, but history is with them. And so I'll come back to that column later. Phil Spector died. Now, he's a murderer. Phil Spector was convicted in 2003. Yeah, 2009, for killing Lana Clarkson, a nightclub hostess who he'd taken to his home after a night of drinking. And he's a very despicable character in some regard. But his music, the Phil Spector Wall of Sound, is part of everyone's who's over the age of 45 musical DNA. Tom Wolfe wrote a 1965 essay about him called The First Tycoon of Teen, a one-man hit factory. Between 1960 and 65, he put 24 records in the top 40, many of them classics. So we'll play Phil Spector music today. I was off the show on Friday, industrial production was announced to have risen a solid 1.6%. That's very good. The worst news of the weekend is the total screw-up of the vaccine distribution system in many states. Now, it's working well in Texas. Governor Greg Abbott's doing a great job in Texas. If your vaccine distribution is screwed up anywhere but the District of Columbia, it's because of your state government, your local governments. The federal government has done its job. It's produced the vaccine. It's gotten it out. And that which has gotten out has not gotten to the people. Thus far in the United States, I'll check the latest, 31 million doses distributed. Only 10,595,000 people have received one or more doses. So 1/3 of the doses out. What is that? It's last mile breakdown. Long story in the Wall Street Journal, which I will return to. It is because government insisted on overcomplicated a simple process. In Orange County, they had a 40-person committee, at least 2/3 of whom had nothing to do with health care. This was not hard. Designate, as they finally got around to doing, I'm told by a friend who received the vaccine, the Disneyland parking lot was designated as a vaccine center. If you were over the age of 65 or had an underlying condition, drive there. Get a vaccine. It worked fine yesterday. That's all you need to do. Americans will self-regulate. Some frauds will show up and say they've got an underlying condition, they don't have one. But that's all you need to do. And it will self-select. You don't have to go around hunting for people. Just tell them where to go. It's not that hard. It's not hard at all. It would have been easy, except it had to be overcomplicated by politics. President-elect Biden is threatening to shut off the Keystone XL oil pipeline. Now, that will be a very interesting decision. It will evoke, of course, lawsuits having to do with the right of government to revoke permits on which they have relied. I look forward more to the litigation than I do to the pipeline, actually. I believe it will give the new Supreme Court a chance to weigh in on the property rights and expectation rights and reliance rights of people issued permits by the government. There's a Wall Street Journal story, Biden's first spending blowout. Look, I don't know whether I'm for or against the $1.9 trillion COVID spending plan, which comes on top of $3.8 trillion already approved by the Congress in the last year. Whether or not it makes sense depends on what it does. And as I talked with Austin Goolsbee, Obama-era economist, on Friday, extending unemployment for people who cannot find jobs makes sense if they're restaurant workers. Getting businesses back up and running, business interruption insurance, a Josh Hawley idea from long ago, makes sense. But if they're just blowing money on state and local governments, I hope that Mitch can find one Democrat to stand with him. Actually, it's not being done under reconciliation, so they'll have to find 10 Republicans in the Senate. The very brave Alexei Navalny returned to Russia yesterday. He's the Russia opposition leader. Now, he doesn't have an official position. It's just he is well known as the most opposed to Putin. 44-year-old Navalny was poisoned in Germany by a nerve agent. He's recovered. He flew back and he was arrested. Jake Sullivan, who I believe is going to be a very good national security advisor, replacing outgoing Ambassador Robert O'Brien, immediately tweeted, Mr. Navalny should be immediately released and the perpetrators of the outrageous attack on his life must be held accountable. The Kremlin's attacks on Mr. Navalny are not just a violation of human rights, but an affront to the Russian people who want their voices heard. Jake Sullivan is correct. From China comes news, if you can believe it, that their GDP rose 6.5% in the fourth quarter. I don't know if you can believe anything out of the Chinese Communist Party, but if that's true, that's a 2.3% growth in a year where every other major economy suffered. If that is in fact true, China authoritarian measures like welding people into their apartment buildings in the early part of the outbreak and not telling the world gave them an economic advantage. I believe upon investigation, we will determine that China knew what it was doing, not in the release of the vaccine. That was negligence or recklessness. And it appears still to be a very good possibility it came out of the lab as opposed to a wet market. But it's definitely out of Wuhan province. And it was definitely not, the world was definitely not alerted. And by not alerting the world, it allowed the world to suffer terribly while China got a head start on shutting it down. Also point out, Israel's coming election in March is going to be of incredible importance to the world. I'll tell you more about that today. And Boris Johnson in Great Britain hails a new milestone as more than 5.6 million people are invited to get their jabs. New phase of their vaccine rollout. This is terrific. The world is catching up. More when I come back. You're listening to today's Hugh Hewitt Show.